Welcome to the Student Ministry Podcast. My name is Steve Cullum, and I'm your host today, and I am so excited for you to be here with us for another conversation with another great student ministry worker. Today's interview is with Justin Knowles. Justin is the student ministries pastor at Christ Church of the Valley in San Dimas, California, and Justin also has his own podcast, which was called the Other Student Ministry Podcast, but is now called Youth Ministry Hacks, in connection with what he does with Download Youth Ministry. So if you're familiar with DYM, you've probably interacted with Justin, whether in the Facebook group or on the website. He blogs for them. He does a lot with DYM, and so you probably maybe heard of Justin. And I'm really excited for you to get to hear his story today and just learn a little more about what God has been doing in his life, to learn about what he does there at DYM, his ministry at his church, and to learn a little more about what he talks about on his own podcast. So I'm excited for you to hear that story. But before we do that, we do need to thank our sponsors, because they are one of the reasons this podcast happens. So first of all, let's thank WorkCamp NE. If you are unfamiliar with WorkCamp NE, maybe this is one of the first times you have tuned into the podcast, let me just tell you about this awesome organization that is based around mission trips, service-based mission trips for your students. Most of them are in the Northeast. They're going to be all over the Northeast doing awesome stuff, but they have started to branch out. Last year was their first year doing camps in Illinois, and they're coming back to Illinois. So maybe you thought, I love WorkCamp NE, I love the mission behind it and everything, but it's a little too far for us to travel to the northeastern area of the United States. But now, within Illinois, maybe that's a little closer for you to check out. So make sure you check out their website, workcampne.com. That's workcampne.com. Thank you for your sponsorship, WorkCamp NE. And our other sponsor is a combined sponsorship between the National Network of Youth Ministries and Reach Youth New England. And we are very grateful for their sponsorship. Both of these organizations are all about combining efforts across churches, across denominations, across communities. And so if you have not yet got connected with another youth worker or a community of youth workers in your area, make sure you check out their websites, because they're built around this idea of connecting us together. Their theme, their motto is "We are better together," and it's so true. So National Network is at youthworkers.net. Youthworkers.net. Pretty simple, right? They just got a brand new website, as a matter of fact, so make sure you check that out. Even if you've been years ago, and make sure you check out their new website. And also, if you're in New England, a great way to get connected is also through Reach Youth New England, and their website is reachyouthne.com. Make sure you check them out and show them some love. Both WorkCamp NE and the combined sponsorship between the National Network and Reach Youth New England, fantastic organizations, and they're all there to help you be a better youth worker and a better student minister. And I'm so thankful for what they do for the Student Ministry Podcast, and what they're going to be able to do for you and in your ministry. So with all that being said, we do want to jump right into that conversation with Justin Knowles today. I know you're going to be blessed by what you hear today, so let's jump right into that. All right, thanks so much for joining us today, Justin.
Steve, we're here. We're making it happen.
We are.
I'm excited. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no problem at all. And I know, you've done ministry for a while. You got your own podcast, so people are expecting a lot for today.
You know what? That's pressure, but we'll see how it goes. I got coffee. We're good to go.
All right, cool. So I'm gonna be a little open and honest. This is actually this like part 2 in a way of this recording, because we were into this discussion and I looked up and I forgot to hit record. So this is actually, there's a little peek behind the scenes. This is round 2 of the beginning of this conversation, because I was so into it. Justin was like going and I totally forgot to hit record.
I was pouring out my heart and I might forget things this time, so I don't even know.
It's what happened. You sucked me in, and I totally forgot to hit the record button. So here we go. So some people know you, Justin, from your Download Youth Ministry stuff, and maybe they listen to your podcast, and maybe others have never heard of you. So take a few moments to discuss like a little bit who you are and how God has got you to the point where you are today.
Totally. I think, let's see where to begin. Well, I live in Southern California, live in a town called Chino. And that's actually where I grew up, and that's where my wife grew up as well. And so Southern Cal, it's Chino. It used to be like all dairies and all that kind of stuff, and it's really fun now because it's starting to be a little bit. They're like getting rid of all the dairies and putting in like fun stuff. So we actually enjoy being where we are right now. I work at a church called Christ Church of the Valley in San Dimas, California. And if you know your movie history, you should know San Dimas of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, San Dimas High School Football Rules. And that's where we actually pulled from that high school, which is really kind of fun because I go to San Dimas High School football games. And they actually do pretty rural. Like they're actually really good over the last couple of years. And so it's in LA County, and I'm trying to think of like, if people don't know where Southern California is, basically it's right outside. It's on the very edge of the suburbs of LA. It's like the last city before you exit LA County. And I've been there for 3 years. It's actually my second round. So I've actually served at this church for a total of 7 years. I've been back for 3 years. I actually started there. My first job getting hired at any church was at CCV.
Cool.
And right out of college. And then I worked at Saddleback for 3 years on the high school ministry team. And then I've been back as like the lead student ministries pastor for 3 years now. And it's been so fun. A lot of changes, a lot of hard work, a lot of painful conversations, and but a lot of God's moving, which is super fun, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Cool.
But for me, my parents randomly started going to church when I was in third grade. Wasn't really a part of anything. I was like involved, but nothing was clicking. Because for me, my thing that I did all through elementary school, all junior high, all high school was baseball. I was a really good baseball player. And like in high school, I had scholarships and was planning on going somewhere on the East Coast and had nothing to do with ministry at all. And, but kind of went through the motions, but at the same time though, like was serving. And I think that probably had a lot to do, a lot of playback, like retrospective of what God was doing in my heart all through junior high and high school. Because when I was 12 years old, I took a group of second graders that I was co-leading with an older guy, and I took them from second grade all the way till senior year of high school.
Wow.
And so I was involved in kind of hanging out with these dudes and studying the Bible, but without really being fully devoted to Jesus, I guess you could say. And then like for me, it was my sophomore year of high school when I was like thinking I was the man because I was getting all these scholarship offers and stuff like that. I dislocated my shoulder and tore all the ligaments in it. And I ended up having to have surgery. And so during this time, I was kind of left with school and church and physical therapy because I was determined to get back into playing so that way I could keep my scholarships and make a name for myself and make a lot of money. You know, that was my kind of high school mindset. And then I rehab, came back. My first game back, I dove for a ball, dislocated my shoulder again, tore all the ligaments again. And it was like at that point, I just kind of realized I was done. And so at that point too, my identity was gone. Yeah. You know, and so in high school, you know, when you put all your hope and faith into that identity, and then all of a sudden in one dive of a ball, it was gone. Definitely went into a dark space. And all I was like left with church and school. Like that's kind of all I went through is just those two things. And that's where, you know, now, cause I wasn't playing baseball, I went to this one, our high school ministries winter camp because I wasn't playing anymore, and was placed into this random group of guys who ended up being my small group, and everything changed. It was that weekend where it all clicked for me of like, oh man, my identity is not in this, it's in Jesus. And the high school pastor was just able to have a conversation with me, and we were able to really, like, it was that trip that changed the trajectory of where I was going.
Wow.
And it was placed into this great small group who I ended up serving or being in a group with the last like year and a half of high school. And so, that kind of changed everything. And he's like, you know what? The high school pastor was like, you're going to do this, because he knew that I was serving. He knew that I was a part of like other things. He's like, you're going to do this for the rest of your life. And I said, nope, nope. I like laughed in his face kind of. And he said, just give me the summer, intern for me, just kind of see what it's like. And I promise you'll see that this is God's calling for you. And so I did, and I never looked back.
That's awesome.
And so that's kind of like the nutshell version of how I got into ministry. And through that whole process too, I have the most important, one of the most important things. Like, I met my wife the summer I graduated high school in Hawaii. Heyo. And we just happened to both be on vacation at the same time in the same place.
That's amazing.
And never met each other. She even went to my church. I didn't know.
And you met in Hawaii.
We met in Hawaii in a hot tub, even better. And so now we've been through that whole process is where I met her, and we started serving together. Like, the time when I started serving is when she started serving. And so we kind of got to know each other through that as well. So
that's really cool.
That's a little bit of like my history of like how I got into ministry. And went to APU, studied youth ministry, ended up getting a church at CCV where I work now. Left for a little bit, went to Saddleback for a couple of years, got to work with Josh Griffin, whoever that is.
And some random
some dude. And we struck up a friendship, and that's kind of I guess it happened to be at the right place at the right time. That's when like Download Youth Ministry started. Like when I was there, and so he asked me to be a part of that, and it's when it kind of launched. And so that's kind of, I write a lot for them on their blog as well. And so, it's just been really fun. It's been a really cool experience, and I love being where I'm at right now. It's been really fun.
Awesome. That's so cool. I love the fact that like you finally had the high school pastors that just said, you know what, this is what I see, and you can't deny it. This is what God's going to do in your life, and don't try to run away from it, because it's going to happen. And I love that's because that's one of the desires that I've had over the last few years. God's just placed this hope and desire to really see that in other students' lives, and be able to, whether it's ministry or whatever it is, but to be able to see their true potential and their God-given potential, and to be able to just point that out of them and call that out of them, so that they can actually rise up and achieve it. And that's so awesome that you had that experience.
Yeah, I mean, and isn't that what we do? Yeah. We call out some students' God-given potential so that they could see it, maybe because they don't see it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. So you've been at CCV for 3 years, is that right?
Yes, that's like the head
this time around.
Dude. Yeah.
So in your high school ministry specific, I know you're like over all the ministries, is that right?
Yeah, the way that we have it structured is I oversee everything, but we have a junior high pastor. I teach in high school, and we do a hybrid kind of service where everyone's together for the first half of service, and then we separate for teaching.
Okay. Cool. So
that's kind of our structure.
Awesome. So feel free to dive in there and like how you got to that structure, and you can talk about programs if you want, but also just your everyday ministry. What's it like on a regular basis there at CCV? Like if someone says, what's your ministry look like? What does it look like?
Totally. So right now, as it stands, we do a Wednesday night midweek program for 7th to 12th grade students, and we, like I just said, it's like a hybrid thing. So for the first half of service, from the patio out and hanging out, that's the great thing about Southern California. The weather's nice about 95% of the time.
Yeah.
And so we have the outdoor patio always going and bumping. And so everyone will come in, and we usually do like a welcome / some sort of upfront game just to get people, blood flowing, laughing and stuff like that. We go straight into a greeting time where we have a new student area where if you brought a friend or it's your first time, like that's where they go and we kind of be connected with, and we give them a little, full-size candy bar type situation, just to say thanks for being here. Time of greeting, and then we go into a couple songs of worship, and then from the worship time, we have a room that's attached to the main auditorium. That's the other part. Like we're a big church on a small campus.
Okay.
And so, our church at least my campus, we probably run around 4,500 people in an auditorium that seats 750. Okay. And so there's basically like our room and then like the kids, or that worship center, and then the kids building. And there's no other room that we could fit in besides the worship center. So we sit, we do the same thing. Like we share that space, which is nice because we get to use all their stuff.
Yeah.
So when they get new stuff, that means we get new stuff.
Right.
But it also sucks because we're set up, tear down.
Right.
And so we have to set up every week, before service. But anyways, attached to the main worship center is kind of like an overflow room or a multi-purpose room. And that's where junior high goes for their time of teaching. And then high school stays in the main auditorium, and Sean Lord is our junior high pastor. Will teach in there. I'll teach in the main auditorium with the high school, and we do the same series. So we're doing the same series all the way through, but me and him teach age appropriate content, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And so. And then on top of that, so that's like our Wednesday program, but before our program, which is like a separate program, and it's something that you said that if there's anything that we kind of do a little bit different, we actually do small groups before service on Wednesday nights on campus, which is a little bit different. There's not that many churches that I know that do that. It's like an option. Kids sign up, they pay even, and they come an hour early before service, and they are in a small group from 6 to 7, and then are out on the patio by 7, and then church starts at 7:30. Okay. So that's like our own little tweak on small groups, and we tried it out for this year, and it's working really great.
It's working well. Okay, cool. So I did actually. I think I was talking to Darian Prinkert, and he was talking about how he set up his small groups to go before as well. And I asked him like why, and he said he was forced into it. How did you guys decide that before was probably the better option for you?
Well, so at our church we do this thing. You might have heard of it. A lot of churches are doing it now. It's called Rooted.
Mm-hmm. We're actually doing it in our church too. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So you're familiar with. If you're not familiar with it, if you're listening, it's like a 10-week intensive. I call it like a small group birthing system, basically, like where you go through and it's like 10 weeks of curriculum, and there's homework, and you have a prayer experience, a serve experience that you do together as a group, and then by the end of the 10 weeks, ideally, is that Rooted group turns into a small group, and you stay. And so we tried to do that because we wanted to be in line with everybody, at our church. But the hard part is that we were asking a lot for students. Like that would end up being 3 nights a week where we're asking them to do something. Yeah. So Wednesday night, and then a Rooted night, and then we want them to go to church on Sunday. So that's 3 days. And so they just weren't doing it. And so we kind of had to rethink we tried it for 2 years, and trying to make it a thing, and it just wasn't working. The number, like how many students were involved, wasn't worth the effort that we were trying to put in. Okay. And so we just kind of rethought things, and I did a whole bunch of research and was looking at this one church in particular in Minnesota. It's called Eagle Brook Church. They're a bigger church than we are, and I'm like, okay, I like what they're doing, and they have a ridiculous amount of students that come before service, and it's a part of their culture now. And so there's a lot of reasons why we just figured that doing small groups beforehand is working for us is because couple of them. One, it's a one-stop shop.
Yep.
And so, it's the students who want to be there are going to be there and show up a little bit early and be in a group. We didn't want to do group after because we are a heavy invite culture, and we were talking about, like, do we just force everyone to be in groups?
Yeah.
Because then we'll get 100% participation. But because we're very an outreach driven model and students bring new friends weekly, the last thing that's super welcoming is, hey, welcome to our church. Here's going to the small group where you have to talk about your feelings and what you're struggling with. And so that's not very welcoming. And so we're like, that's not kind of where we're at with that, at least not how we're structured or what our church is about. And so we kind of said, okay, if we do it beforehand. And the last one is we only do Wednesday night events. So, like, we don't do any standalone events. And so every event that we do is attached to a Wednesday. Okay. And so if small groups are afterwards, then do they miss the event? Do we cancel the event? Do we stop doing events? And so we just said, okay, beforehand kind of hits all the boxes that we're hoping for. It's students who want to be there. They're not going to be forced to go. Like, obviously that's going to be our big push from the main stage is, hey, you need to be in a group. This is how you be in a group is you come an hour early and you can be placed in one, and then you could go to service together with your group. Two, it doesn't, if you're new or if you invite someone, you could still go to a group and still have your friends show up at 7. Or if you want to invite someone when we do an event, you don't have to miss a group because you could come to group beforehand and still do the event afterwards. So it kind of hit all of our boxes as far as like what we're hoping to accomplish.
Cool. And so those small groups, are they going through Rooted, or do they go through something that's connected with what you guys talk about each night, or how's that? The content,
they're like a preamble to the message that night. Okay. And so what we do is whatever series we're going through, we'll create the curriculum at the very beginning of the series. We'll send it out to our leaders, and whatever passage that we're going to talk about that night, they will go and read through it and then answer a couple questions that go with it, and then they'll go hear like a very much more detailed like teaching on that passage.
Okay, cool.
So, and it seems to be working. Like for us, like our goal this year was to have 50% of our students go through it and be involved, and we're at like a 53. So we hit what we're hoping for this first year, and then hoping to grow it as the culture becomes more and more normal.
That's cool. Awesome. All right. So you've been in a couple different churches. You've had some different levels of experience with volunteering and being on staff and kind of everything in between, being a part of youth ministry yourself when you were in middle school, high school. So I'm sure you've learned a lot over the years. You even talk about this on your regular podcast, talk about some different hacks and different things to make ministry better. So I know your mind's filled with tons of different tips and stuff. Do you care to share just a couple of them as we wrap up here? Just things that maybe you would go back in time if you were to say to Justin, maybe like 10 years ago, hey, you know what? This would really benefit your ministry if you did this earlier on. What are some of those maybe tips that you've learned along the way?
Yeah. Oh man. I think so. We're about to get real, Steve. Okay.
All right.
Because it's something that I'm currently going through, something that I am wrestling with and praying through on my own end, and kind of coming to my own. Cause this is, the last 3 years, I've been in student ministry for 10 years, but I've only been leading a team for 3.
Okay.
I've been on a team, for 7 years, and this is my first time actually like leading out where I'm the main dude.
Yeah.
And I think for me, if I could go back, if you're like asking for like hacks, is just like the realization and kind of what I'm coming, because like I'm a people pleaser in a sense, like we all kind of are, that we don't want people to be mad at us, or parents to be mad at us, or your higher ups to be mad at you, or to be frustrated with you. And it's something that I've kind of been trying to navigate and been learning on my own end is how can I say this? nicely, is I'm learning, like, I wish I would have learned a long time ago that the only people that I need to have approval of are the Lord, number one, my senior pastor, because my job is to carry out his vision of the church in the student ministry like way, and then my immediate supervisor. And nobody else matters, really. Like, in a sense, like, as long as those three, as long as I feel like I have a calling from God and a vision of the ministry in which he's called me to, and the senior pastor approves it, and he's like, yes, I like this. And then my supervisor as well, who's working with me directly and kind of knows more of the ins and outs, that says, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Then that's kind of all I needed. To move forward and to make sure that I'm headed that way. And, everyone else is thank you for your consideration. Thank you for your input. I'll consider it. And then kind of move on from there. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so, because at the very beginning, I was like, I'm trying to please everybody. And I would be really, sorry, but like diarrhea for a week if I had to like have a conversation because, that person didn't like something I was doing. And so I think just kind of having that realization of, man, it's a lot more freeing when the people who really matter, who actually have time, the elders at my church, if there's one particular that I know that is like not a fan of me. And so he always tells me how to do stuff, and I can look at him confidently and just say, no, you're not over me. And so to like walk through that, I wish that was one of the things that I wish that I would have realized.
Well, it's so interesting. And everybody listening, if you've been in student ministry for probably a week or more, that like everybody has their opinions. And I think one of the hardest things is my recent transition. I was going to establish church, one that has had a lot of different youth pastors over the years, especially in recent years. And so there's been a lot of turnover, and everybody has their opinions. And, it's one of the things that I knew going into it. But once you get into it, you're like, wow, sometimes it's really overwhelming that almost every parent you come across and leader you come across, and everybody has their way of doing it. But I love what you said about like the confidence. If we're able to have that level of confidence, all of a sudden, what I've realized is that you gain respect from those people that even have their opinions, that all of a sudden you start portraying the fact that you have this under control, even if you really don't. But you kind of just like, hey, you know what? God's entrusted this ministry to me, and I have some ideas, and I've been the one called to do this. And if you take that very seriously, all of a sudden, I've noticed, not everybody, but a lot of those people that have opinions, all of a sudden start changing their mindset toward you, and they start showing some respect because you're doing it the right way instead of just bending to every little opinion that you hear all the time.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot more freeing. Like, I kind of walk around going like, yeah, this is what I know I'm supposed to do. This is what I know that we're called to do. Yeah. And I got back up, because if anyone else is mad or upset and they go to my supervisor or even the senior pastor, they go, no, this is where we're going. Like, this is kind of, I already know that. And yes, I approve of it, and so it kind of allows them to back you up a little bit. For sure.
Yeah. Any other tips or anything?
Kind of along the same line, honestly, like as I've been kind of thinking through, and is obviously you could tell like kind of where I'm at in my leadership journey, of going through just based off of these two things, is like what kind of along the same line of, what voices are you allowing it to speak into you? Like obviously, there's a whole bunch of people who try to tell you to do a whole bunch of different things because they're, no one's going to be as passionate about your ministry as you are. And so, walking through of like, who do you actually allow to speak into you? And I kind of and I wish I would have discovered this a long time ago. And I don't know where I heard this, so I don't know where to give credit, but if or someone's listening like feel free to let me know so I could give proper credit to where it's due, is like, I just started asking myself like 3 questions when it comes to when people have an idea for my ministry or an idea for me of what I need to do. And I wish I would have known this a long time ago, because I think it would have saved me a lot of stress and anxiety, because I do struggle with anxiety. I go to counseling on the regular, and so like I think this would have helped a long way. And like the first one is, does whoever it is that is speaking or is trying to tell me to do something, do they love Jesus more than I do? And because obviously I want to take advice from someone. Like if my goal is to be more like Jesus, then I want to take advice from people who know him better than me and who can maybe hear or see something different, from him than I would. And so like if they do they love Jesus more than I do? Or as passionate, is their relationship active? And that I could see it being a part of their life. And the second question is, do they love me? Like is something that they're asking me to do, is because they want something out of it? Is it something out of their own agenda? Is it like, hey, I think you should add this to your program? Are they asking me because they really think that's something that's beneficial to them, or because they want to take it over, or are they asking because they're not really caring about that this is really going to kill me or my family because I'm adding this onto my plate? Kind of looking at that, like where are they asking? Do they love me? Like I want someone who's speaking into me that says, hey, you're thinking about adding this to your thing, but like, what about your wife? Yeah. Or have you thought about this? How many nights a week are you going to be out? And so, so that, do they love me as a person, and making sure that I'm healthy as a human? And then the last one is, do they love my ministry or church? Like, are they behind what we're doing? Obviously if they're not behind, another part that we probably could have gone into is we don't have any Sunday programming for students at all. Okay. Because I actually believe that it's more important for students to go in with their parents, and to worship alongside them. That's more effective, and they're part of the church. That Jeff, our senior pastor, he's their pastor, and I'm their pastor for 6 years. But then when they graduate, maybe they won't. Maybe they won't graduate. Church. And so that when that kind of came down, when we had like a junior high thing going, and I killed that, like people were upset. Obviously. And so, asking people, like when people speak into me and what I should do, is like, do they love like my ministry and where it's going, and do they support it? And if they do, then if they have something to say, then I'm more likely to listen to them, rather than because they're just upset because they don't like one decision that I made. You know what I mean? Right. And so, and if the answer is no to any of those questions, then that's where I say, hey, thank you for your suggestion. I'll think about it. And then just let it go. And then, if the answer is yes, then I'm like, okay, then maybe this is something I should listen to or consider, like prayerfully. And so, that's kind of, we just went into a very deep part of Justin's heart right now, because that's what I'm going through and kind of like wrestling with right now. So
well, that's cool, because I think it's so important. I think over the years, as student ministry has become less and less of a stepping stone to quote unquote real ministry, I think less and less people are seeing it as such, and they're seeing it as a real significant thing. Men and women are being called to student ministry specifically. I think that's my calling. I don't have this desire to ever be anything else other than a student pastor. And if we take our job seriously like that, then we need to do the things that you're talking about, is to pay attention to the right people, and also put people in our lives to seek out people they're going to help us be better at what we are called to do. That it's not just a stepping stone, and hopefully I'll reach a couple kids on the way. This is a significant thing, and so we need to treat it as such, which means that we need to be really taking care of ourselves in the whole process as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So totally agree with all that. At some point, I'm gonna pick your brain a little bit about your taking middle school and junior high or whatever off of Sunday, because it's one of those things that right now I'm like, I don't know, it kind of seems like a sacred cow. We moved high school off of it. I'm like, I might kind of wait a little bit on the middle school for just a little bit, but we'll see long term. So I'd love to pick your brain in another time to see how that all went down, and maybe
totally. It took 3 years.
Yeah,
I'll just let you know right now. It took a long time. You're like, you junior hires don't know how to sing. I'm like, no, like if you raise the bar, like they'll meet it. Yeah. They're not dumb.
Yeah.
Like they'll sit in there, especially if you're, I don't know what your service is like, but our services are Jeff, our senior pastor, is probably like one of the best teachers,
cool
Bible teachers, engaging, and the music's the same. We sing the same songs and stuff on Wednesday nights that we do on Sunday. So I'm like, they can hang, and it doesn't matter even if they get it, they're watching you worship, parents.
Right.
And so like they need to see that.
Yeah.
And so it's been fun. I would love to talk with you about it.
Awesome. Sweet. So thanks so much for joining us today, Justin. I'm sure people are going to want to learn more about you and contact you more. What's the best way for them to get in contact with you? And feel free to talk about your podcast. I know there's been some recent changes in it as well, some cool things going on. So feel free to dive in there and plug whatever you want.
Totally. Probably easiest way to get a hold of me, probably Instagram. It's probably the best one. You could slide on into my DMs. You know what I mean? As what the students say. But it's Justin Knowles 3, and that's with Instagram and Twitter. You could follow along there. And I also do a blog, or I write on the Download Youth Ministry blog a couple times a week. And then I do a podcast with our worship leader for students. His name's Matt. And it's the Youth Ministry Hacks podcast. And it used to be the other student ministry podcast, but some fun news is that Download Youth Ministry starting a podcast network, and they asked us to be a part of it. And part of that was a name change, because it's more telling of what our show's about.
Yeah.
And so we just were trying to be clever with our name, because now podcasts are a thing.
Right.
When they didn't used to be a thing. Yeah. And so, so that's a couple of different ways that you could kind of connect with me. And I dive into a lot more in detail stuff on the podcast about like what we do specifically, ministry specific. So
cool.
That's where we're at.
Awesome. Make sure you check out Justin's stuff, and you got some stuff on the Download Youth Ministry store as well. So make sure you slide over there and check out some stuff. What's maybe one of your favorite things that you put up you're really proud of?
I think one of the favorite message series that I've ever done is a series called That's What He Said. One, because I'm a huge Office fan, and two, it's talking about the I am statements of Jesus. And it's one of my favorite ones, and it's one of my most sold ones, I guess, bought ones. And so I got a lot of good feedback on it. So I'm really excited about that one.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for joining us, and man, God bless your ministry there in California.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation today with Justin Knowles. And if you did, please do us a favor and share it out with other youth workers, and leave a positive comment on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, whatever service that you use to listen to the Student Ministry Podcast. If you would, please leave a positive comment. That just helps us rise to the top and helps other youth workers find us. And please share it out there on social media. Let other people hear these great conversations, and especially the awesome work that God is doing around the world. People need to hear these stories. It's encouraging. We learn from each other, and just like our sponsors, we are better together. And so the world needs to hear about these conversations that we're having. So please do us a favor and share those out with everybody else, and also do us a favor by checking out the websites of the sponsors that are so generous to support the Student Ministry Podcast. WorkCamp NE is WorkCampNE.com, and the National Network of Youth Ministries is youthworkers.net, and Reach Youth New England is reachyouthne.com. Little tidbit, so just so you know, I actually just signed on with the National Network to be the state coordinator for Colorado. It's kind of a cool new thing that I'm doing. I've been here for 6 months in my new ministry and just felt like God was asking me to do that. So, hey, if you're out there and in Colorado and you've been listening to this podcast, know that I want to connect with you and make sure that we can do this together. So make sure you shoot me an email, Twitter, or whatever, and I would love to connect with you, especially if you're in Colorado, because that's going to be what I'm doing now with the national network is really building that partnership up within the churches within Colorado. So it's going to be really awesome to do that. I'm also this week, so maybe you're listening to, I don't know what day you're going to listen to this, but we put it out on February 5th of 2018, and actually I'm heading to the Youth Ministry Leadership Exchange this week in Atlanta. It's a combined conference, that's brand new, between the Download Youth Ministry guys and also with Orange. So if you're familiar with Orange and all the work they do with family ministry, and the Fuller Youth Institute. So all those organizations, amazing youth ministry organizations, coming together to put on YMLX there in Atlanta, and I'm really excited to head down there. So I'm going to try to get some interviews. I'm not promising anything. I'm not really sure what's going to happen. I'm going to be leading table discussions and trying to blog for them as well. And so there's a lot of moving pieces, a new conference and stuff. So I don't know how much time I'm going to get to do some interviews, but I'm going to try to maybe at the very least try to get some snippets. So maybe we'll see. I'm trying to try to see if I can work that into the podcast at some point. Maybe we'll have an episode of just a bunch of really quick snippets of different, short interviews with different youth workers that I got to talk to while I was down there or something. And I'm just kind of toying around with some ideas. So if that kind of idea sounds exciting to you, make sure you let me know, because I'm also going to be heading down to the Orange Conference in April as well. And it's another opportunity that I might have to do some of those quick interviews as well, and some long ones in person. And if that's something that you would like to hear about on this podcast, make sure you let me know. You can look me up on Twitter. I'm at Steve Cullum. And also, if you haven't followed the Student Ministry Podcast on Twitter, we are at StuMinPod. That's STUMINPOD. It's like everything abbreviated because we couldn't have that gigantic long username on Twitter. And we're also on Facebook. So if you haven't checked us out on Facebook, follow us over there as well. And just shoot me some information. Hey, that sounds cool. Or maybe you have a different idea. And like, hey, Steve, I think you should do this instead. I would love to hear from you. Love to hear your feedback. And at the same time, if you have another youth worker out there that you're like, hey, you got to get him or her on your show, make sure you let me know as well. I want to get the people that you want to hear from, and that the world needs to hear these stories. So thank you so much again for tuning in. We're going to let you go, but before that, I just want to say once again, God bless your ministry that you do with students and teenagers and families. Man, it's so important, so keep it up.